Welcome to the Four Eyes podcast, brought to you by Young OD Connect. We give you a clear view into the new grad optometry world across Canada and the US. We are your hosts. I'm Dr. Deepan Kaur.
And I'm Dr. Amrit Bilku. And today we're going to be talking with Dr. George Magrath. So he's an ophthalmologist practicing out of South Carolina. He's trained in ocular oncology from the Wills Eye Hospital in Philadelphia. And he's also a CEO of a pharmaceutical company, which uses AI technology to tackle the challenges of ophthalmic drug development in clinical trials and patient selection in clinical trials. So AI is definitely something that's been around for years, but it is a huge topic in the eye care world right now. So Deepan and I are really interested and really excited to talk with Dr. Magrath to just learn about it and see how it's improving the healthcare of the eye industry. So without further ado, we'll get started.
Can you tell us about yourself and how you ended up where you are today by being a CEO of a pharmaceutical company and an ophthalmologist that actively is still practicing medicine?
Yeah, and I don't practice as much now as I used to by any means. So it's
but still, you're practicing a little bit, even though you're still CEO of this.
It's definitely a give and
company.
take, but you know, it's just, I don't know. I've always sort of just followed what I felt was really interesting, fun, and impactful. And so as my career's morphed, it's morphed into different things, right? And so I'm an ophthalmologist. I did my fellowship training at Wills in Philadelphia in ocular oncology, and that was super cool because I got the opportunity to treat patients that had limited access to care, particularly in South Carolina. And so I was able to go to the medical university and do some ocular oncology and supplement it with medical retina and some other things like that. And I got into really the pharma side through I was doing some initial work on my master's degree in economics because I kind of enjoy that kind of stuff. And some opportunities came about for me to become an equity analyst. And then that turned into working at a company called Hovium, where we had a minocycline gel for meibomian gland dysfunction and a few other products in respiratory and dermatology. And we had an ivermectin gel for Demodex that we were developing there. And then that sort of just snowballed into Lexitas. I had known Lexitas for quite a while after, they were our service provider. They ran our studies for us. And so I'd known them for 6 years or so. And so got the opportunity to work with them. So it just kind of always has snowballed, and it's been a lot of fun. And what the cool thing about being in the industry and doing clinical studies and trials is that your impact on people can be leveraged, right? Because the work that we do hopefully will impact a lot of patients around the world and not just one or two patients I can see myself. So that's really the reason that I do what I do. And it's a lot of fun. So I enjoy it.
So George, the whole topic today is kind of swimming around artificial intelligence, right? So AI technology, it's always been there, but it's definitely getting a lot of attention, especially in the eye care world these days. So can you tell us more about your experience in, the sort of pharma area and how pharma companies are now using AI technology in clinical trials in ophthalmology specifically?
That's super cool, and it's definitely transforming our field, right? So it's transforming, and hopefully it's going to transform how the three of us all practice medicine at some point. So I think it's going to be a really positive impact. But there's a few different ways, right? So you hear a lot about AI for drug discovery. And that's a little bit outside of what I do. I do more of AI in clinical trials and then also AI in the clinical setting. And what we've really used it for in clinical studies is helping is really two things, right? Number one is helping the clinical scientists understand more about their drug, right? So if you can pick up additional insights into which patients are responding, how they're responding, how the images are changing in patients that get the medicine versus patients who don't, then you can have a better insight into the mechanism and exactly where it works. And that leads sort of into the second thing that we're starting to use it for, which is to help select the right patients, right? So you guys know that particularly in dry eye, it's all about fitting the right medicine to the right patient at the right time.
Yeah.
And so that's what we try and do in clinical trials too, is pick out the patients who are most likely to respond to a particular mechanism of action of a drug, and then get those patients in the trial. And it really is, I mean, it's such a great thing because it allows you to really avoid putting patients who may not respond into a clinical study, right? So you don't expose them to that risk or put them through that kind of commitment and time, and you can concentrate on the people who will respond. And then the second aspect is kind of the extension of that, which is in clinical practice, which is using artificial intelligence to help us make clinical decisions. And in ophthalmology and optometry, both of our fields specifically, I think the first thing that's going to happen is around imaging. One of the projects that we're doing right now is that we multi-step project. First step was we created an algorithm that can identify DME on an OCT, right? So you can show the computer literally a JPEG OCT, and it can tell you with greater than 95% sensitivity and specificity whether or not that patient has DME.
Wow.
And the second aspect to that is actually an application, right? Which is okay, can the computer pick out OCTs of patients that are more likely to respond to VEGF treatment or to steroid treatment in DME,
wow.
right? And the thought process behind that is it comes directly from clinical practice, right? When I see a DME patient, I'm thinking that as you guys know, diabetic macular edema, diabetic retinopathy is a mixture of VEGF-driven pathology and inflammatory-driven pathology, right? So the ischemia causes kind of both. And some patients respond really well to anti-VEGF agents, and other patients respond really well to steroids. And it's like, just seems so crude to me, right? I always start patients on anti-VEGF because it's a little bit safer, and then I'll wait and see if they fail, right? And if they fail over the course of 4 or 6 months, then you switch them over and you try Ozurdex or something like that. And so the clinical question is literally, can I pick out those patients that need the steroid up front and avoid them having to get VEGF for 6 months, and avoid them having to go through a period where they fail the medicine. And so we're doing that right now. We've taken our database and we're just it's a very simple thing, right? From my standpoint, it's very complicated from the computer scientist standpoint. But from my standpoint, it's pretty straightforward. We had 6,000 diabetic patients, and I think the evaluable OCTs that we had on patients where we had a before and after was really like 500 or so. So it wasn't as many, but it's still a good number. And what we did is we just looked at the patients. We fed the OCT images, and we tagged those OCT images with the response, right, with the change in CST, and we just fed them into the computer. And that's what we're doing right now, is seeing if the computer can look at that OCT and basically correlate it with the change in CST with the treatment.
Wow.
And so the idea is that you'll be able to have the machine look at an OCT and tell you, okay, we would expect this patient's, based on their OCT, we'd expect this patient to respond really well to VEGF or really well to steroid or really well to either or not well to either. So that's the kind of stuff those are like the kind of questions that we're asking. And I'm lucky to be partnered with some great computer science people who can actually do all the heavy lifting. And my job is really to provide images and sort of just help ask the question. And so it's pretty fun stuff. Yeah.
Well, I think
Yeah,
that's
I was
awesome. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
no, I was just gonna say, who's figuring out all these algorithms in the back to figure out which
So
OCT works? Like, because that would just
yeah,
whoop go over my head
Yeah.
and be like, "Do we have it yet, guys? Are we good? We have our
yeah,
Yeah.
patient."
You just come in every 5 minutes.
Yeah.
You getting there,
yeah,
guys?
yeah. You
Water?
guys are.
Anyone?
That's about the extent of my knowledge of it. So
Yeah.
I've got two partners on this, and one of them is at Clemson University, and it's the computer science program there, and that's who I started with. And then there's another commercial company out there that I work really closely with called Voxceleron,
Hmm.
and they're literally like amazing computer scientists. I mean, they've been at it with OCTs for over a decade now,
Hmm.
and
Oh, wow.
they've actually published their AI algorithm on GA progression that I was not
Oh.
involved in, but they
Oh
published
wow.
that a couple years ago. So they've done some really cool stuff, and the best thing about those guys is that they're really approachable, right? So
Hmm.
I just ask them the questions and provide the data, and they can they will turn around results pretty fast. They did another thing since you're into dry eye that they did with us using some AI or machine learning was quantification of corneal nerves on confocal microscopy in the setting
Hmm.
of neurotrophic keratitis. And so they were able to use the computer to sort of automatically pick out the density of the nerves, the tortuosity of the nerves, the branching of the nerves, all those things that cornea people look for in
Yeah.
neurotrophic keratitis patients. So that was a very cool thing that they did.
Mhm.
And then obviously Retina AI is out there. They're making a
Yeah.
splash, doing a lot of work too. And there's more coming. The other aspect of AI that's very cool is like the stuff that there's a company called Verana that is using the Iris registry. It's literally a registry of patients from ophthalmologists around the United States, and it ties into EMRs and will pull information and stuff like that from patient data, and it creates a massive like big data set. And so there's a company out there, there's probably multiple companies, but the ones I'm familiar with is called Verana, and
Hmm.
they specialize in mining that data set. So at least tens of thousands of patients, if not hundreds of thousands at this point, and they can go through and sift through the data. And so in the clinical trial space, what Verana can do is tell you essentially exactly where certain patients are based on the data that's been uploaded into that system. So they can really tell you, hey, there are X number of GA patients in the country, and there are Y number that would meet the criteria of,
Wow.
lesions, X size, things like that. So they have a cool bend on AI too, that's based on trial enrollment and finding the right patients. That's really neat.
I find that so helpful because if anyone's wanting to work on a study or create a trial and they're just sitting in their office just going like, "Man, like I wonder, how many people would, are struggling with XYZ or who would also benefit from this sort of a treatment." So you can just go up on this database, type in, I want to find patients with this finding and this retinal finding and this
Mhm.
VA and this, and then it just finds exactly those number of patients.
It tries to, yeah,
'Cause
absolutely,
that's so
yeah.
cool, but then I find that do the patients know that they're in this database? Because it could be really creepy that someone in, like, Montana gets, like, a letter in the mail one day going like, "Hi, my name is Doctor Magrath from South Carolina. Do you
So
wanna be in my
yeah,
trial?"
so you can't the one thing you can't do is you can't so the iris registry is completely de-identified, and to
Okay.
the best of my knowledge. And
Yeah.
so we've never tried, but I think it's also impossible to say like, oh, okay, here's the number of patients, and also here's their name and phone number.
Yeah. Okay,
Okay.
so it just
So
gives you the data,
yeah.
not like their contact
Yeah.
info.
So what it does for us is it'll tell you like you go to for you guys' sake, you go to like Toronto and you would
Yeah.
expect there to be X number of patients there. So, you know, we then would go to the doctors, the retina doctors or the
Yeah.
cornea or the optometrist or whoever in the area, and sign them up like we normally would for a trial and
Got it.
through the IRB. Yeah.
That's actually really cool stuff. Like
Mhm.
I am not into the topics of artificial intelligence that often. So I'm always I know that it's out there and I know that it's helpful, but I never really knew the details of what AI was really helping with. But I mean, everything that you've talked about so far doesn't sound scary at all and doesn't sound confusing. Like that's awesome. You can just ask a question like, how many patients would benefit from this just based on their OCT scans? I think that's an awesome sort of a project that AI is working on. I think that's
Yeah, I
great.
mean, the stuff that we've worked on, like the stuff that we've done has all been sort of like pattern recognition, right? Like
Mhm.
can the computer pick out patterns in the data that we can't see, right? That
Yeah.
we're not able to see.
Dr. McGrath, then how is AI being harnessed in the development of medication then or eye drops, medicated eye drops? How is
Mhm.
it working in that area?
Yeah, so our specialty would be in using artificial intelligence to gather more information about how the drug works, right? So to be able to
Hmm.
look at changes in OCT, changes in fundus photographs, stuff like that, that really will help you understand how it's working on people, right? What's actually happening. And so we've done it on that. I know there's a whole nother field of it in drug discovery where they're using AI to help target, what might have been like considered undruggable type targets, right? So
Hmm.
to go after mechanisms that would have been hard to go after in without using the computer and big data sets. And so that's outside of my expertise. So I don't really know much about that, but I know a lot of people are doing it, and it sounds like it's super cool. But we're more on just the clinical development side, and so,
Got it.
so that's what we've been using it for is really trying to find the right patients, B, learn as much about the medicines and how they're working as we can in the trials, and then C, design the right endpoints for further trials, right? So
Hmm.
when you get this information, it can be used to try to make sure in your next trial that you're refining your population, you're refining your endpoint, you're making it a better trial to try to test whatever hypothesis you're going to test.
Hmm.
So like just what Amrit was saying before, and with AI kind of coming out, you have some people that are really afraid of it, some
Yeah.
people that don't know what's going on, and some people that are like, yeah, this is really going to be very useful. But in your previous interviews, I know you've talked about this before, but how can AI bring these medications to the market and basically close the wealth inequality gap in US healthcare? How can it bring the people who can't afford these kind of medications to the forefront?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's a big topic too. I think one of
Yeah.
the, one of the biggest problems that we have is how expensive it is to develop medicines. And
Yes.
I
Mhm.
think that does a couple things right. So a lot of good medicines don't get developed because of how expensive it is. And
Hmm.
then B, you have to for people to continue investing in making new medicines, you have to have a return. And if it's an expensive medicine, I mean, if it's expensive to develop it, then it's going to have to be expensive to sell it. And
Yeah.
so, driving down the cost is a critical thing. And if you can pick out the right patients at the right time, with the right pathology in any better way, if you can refine your ability to pick the right patients, you can dramatically reduce the most important thing is you dramatically reduce the unnecessary exposure of the medicine to people, right? So if people aren't
Mm.
going to respond to it, you certainly don't want to expose them to a medicine, experimental medicine.
Yeah.
And so so number one is that, but number two, the ancillary benefit of that is that it will hopefully reduce the size of your trial and therefore the cost of your trial. And
Mm.
it's quite expensive per patient. And so if you can knock your number of patients you need to prove whether or not a drug is safe and efficacious down, then that's a big win as far as efficiency goes, in time and money. And so I think that's a really, really helpful thing, on the development side, right?
Hmm.
And hopefully the computers will get good enough where we can actually model a lot of what's going to happen outside of a trial, right? We can run more
Mm.
simulation based evaluations and help us, get rid of the 75% of candidate drugs that never make it to approval, right? So
Yeah.
right now you've got, of compounds entering phase one, only 25% of them will actually make it to the market. So there's a big
Wow.
inefficiency there with 75% of those where people are putting time, money, and resources. Patients are getting exposed to them, things like that, and
Mm-hmm.
they're not good medicines, or they're not going to make it to approval. And so I think there's a real need, and I haven't done any. I'm not sure we're there yet, but if there, and I'm sure there will be in the future. But if there's a way that you can simulate that, it would be very cool too. So I think that both of those drive down the cost of developing it, which I think is a really good thing. And then on the commercial side, right, on the market side, when the drugs are out there, I really think that you're going to decrease the equity gap and have a better uptake of medicines if you understand more about what they do and you understand more about the right patients that
Yeah.
will respond to them.
Like how to prescribe it properly to the right person.
Mhm.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So, you still run into some problems with how expensive it is and stuff like that. But if you really know that it's going to work for someone, it's a much different story than a shot in the dark. And so
Yeah.
I think it's coming, and I think it's all part of the personalized medicine kind of revolution that's happening.
I agree. I find that most patients that I'm talking to, most people that I'm surrounded by, everyone wants their healthcare to be a little bit more individualized and personalized
Hmm.
for them rather than saying, "Hey, I give the same medication to everyone with the same health problem, so here you go." I'm
Mhm.
sure everyone now in this age of the world is kind of wanting something more personal for them. Yeah.
Absolutely. And you're living it in vision therapy, right? Where that's a
Yeah.
very personalized thing where every patient is so different. And the
Yeah.
same, and
Even with
dry
dry
eyes
eye.
has
Yeah.
been a revolution, right? It used to just be everybody gets artificial tears
Yeah.
and
Some people
and
still get that only.
yeah.
That's the
And,
therapy only
Those are
sometimes
my
for some.
patients. My patients get preservative free, artificial tears only.
yeah. And
But yeah,
and
you're
now
so right. Yeah.
Yeah.
you guys have so many different things now, and you're truly looking at, okay, is it aqueous deficient or is it
Yeah.
evaporative or all these other things that I don't even really understand that you guys are so good at now.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Well,
Yeah.
don't worry. You can totally handle the macular edema for diabetic retinopathy because
I had
we
a question about so you were talking about like these OCT images for diabetic macular edema or AMD. I don't know if you'll be able to answer this, but do you know when this kind of technology will be coming out to us? Or is this like 20 years,
more
30
readily
years,
available, I
No, I don't think it's
guess.
yeah,
gonna be that
50 years
long.
down the road? Or
I
will
think,
we be still practicing so we can see this? Or like,
the
'cause this is
the
so
question
cool.
the biggest question is going to be, so first of all, I think the computer scientists are pretty close to being able to do it now.
Okay.
Wow.
I think the unknown is how regulated. And you guys are in Canada, so it might be a little bit different, but in the
Mhm.
US, the FDA actually has been pretty good about putting out new guidances on AI driven software and things like that. But what really do the clinical trials need to look like? What does the approval process really need to look like to look at a computer algorithm that is going to help make clinical choices
Hmm.
for patients? And so I think it really is mostly a regulatory question about what's involved. And then honestly, in the market, there will be the commercial question, right? So who pays for what,
Yeah.
and how do you value it and things like that. And so those are two huge areas of unknown that will have to get worked out before the three of us can have it in our clinic. But but I think from a computer science standpoint, I think they pretty much do it. So
Yeah, I was actually going to add
yeah.
to Deepon's question. I guess for clinical trials that are going on in the US,
Mhm.
how many clinical trials can have access to this sort of AI? Because that I think that sounds
Yeah.
like the first step is
Yes.
getting access to, all different research centers being able to use this sort of AI technology. So what you're working on with your computer geeks in the background, is this sort of technology only what you're using in South Carolina, or is this technology that is available to like other states, other
It's
practitioners?
Yeah, it's available. It's available anywhere, right? And in clinical trial
Okay.
setting, it can be it can be used because it's non-interventional, so it has less than minimal harm to patients,
Mhm.
and then B, it has it's not being used to make treatment decisions. It's being
Got it.
right now it's being used as sort of ancillary evaluations to help
Yeah.
better understand the drug, right? Not to define treatment for any patient.
Yeah.
And so I think you're right. That is the first step, right? Because it's a much less risky, much softer entry point
Mhm.
into using it in the clinical context than it would be if you to go all in,
Yeah.
making clinical decisions off of it. So,
Yeah.
and it's definitely available, and a lot of people are doing it. A lot of people are using Retina AI. A lot of people are using the Voxeleron group. A lot of people are doing it. Um, you know, I just have one or two small projects, but there are
Mhm.
like so many people who are deep into this that are
Oh,
true
wow.
revolutionary, type people in the field. So
That's
yeah, it's
awesome.
very cool. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so cool to learn about this stuff because yeah, Deepon and I we don't think about how AI is being used in the profession
Mm-mm.
on a daily basis.
Mhm.
And actually, I had a really interesting. Oh, I want to know something really interesting about your history because you are an ophthalmologist who, specializes in ocular oncology.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I read in one of your previous interviews, I'm not 100% sure, but have you used this sort of AI technology in clinical trials to help treat your oncology patients too? I know you've also helped a lot of pediatric oncology patients. Like, has this technology helped in that area of ophthalmology yet?
Not quite yet. So not in
Mhm.
clinical practice, right? So
Okay.
it's coming. So what we are very dependent on images
Yeah.
in ocular oncology, right? Looking
Mhm.
at all the different multimodal images and putting them together to try to decide if something is a melanoma or a nevus or
Yeah.
a retinoblastoma or Coast disease or
Yeah.
whatever. And so we spend a lot of our time looking at the intricacies of the images, and so that is very, very ripe for disruption in this area. And I think
Mm.
that the Philadelphia group has been revolutionary in categorizing and putting together all the images for ocular oncology diseases. And
Mhm.
so they really have built the data sets, right, and published all of their findings, right, and they have their mnemonics and things like that where you can
Yeah.
really pick out high risk lesions and stuff like that. And so that's really the first step to it, and the second step is to get the computer to take it from there,
Yeah.
basically, and improve on that or automate it, or a combination of those two. So it's a very ripe field for that to happen. um,
Mhm.
but I haven't personally participated in it yet.
Okay. Yeah, I figured that would be really helpful too. Like you just said,
Mhm.
melanoma versus nevus. I mean,
Mhm.
if you can take a picture of it, upload it onto that computer, and it can maybe analyze different characteristics of each just
Mhm.
for a practitioner to know it does this look suspicious? Is this something I even need to refer out? Is this something we
Mhm.
can monitor? I think that would be really cool if AI could even help regular practitioners like make those decisions.
Oh,
Mhm.
100%.
Yeah, that would be
Yeah,
really cool.
absolutely. It'd be very
Yeah.
cool. Yeah.
Well, is there
And
anything else that you want to let us know about, AI and just how you're using it on a regular basis with your company? Because I think it's so interesting, and I'm really glad that we learned about it today. Because I don't think we would have ever thought of that
Mhm.
AI is playing a role behind the scenes the whole
yeah.
time.
No, no, I would, it's a fun field. So I would encourage people to just, in ophthalmology, we're so image based, right?
Mhm.
It's pattern recognition,
Yeah.
really advanced images. We're so lucky we have things like OCT, which are miraculous to think about how they can take they can take cross-sectional views of the retina. That kind of resolution is just remarkable. OCTA, stuff like that. It's so it's we're in such a great field for it. And if you follow the literature, you'll see a lot coming out. And I would encourage everybody, and I have no horse in the race for either of the companies that are doing it, but I would definitely encourage people to check out Voxeleron and what they can do, and also Retina AI and what they can do, because they really are at the forefront, and they're doing some very, very cool stuff that's going to transform optometry and ophthalmology in the future.
Yeah, definitely. No, we will include the links to those companies and for your information and contact information in the description box for everyone. Because then if they're really interested in what you're doing too, then hopefully our listeners can contact you directly and get in touch with you to actually learn more, because I think you'd be the best person for them to talk to about it.
Awesome. Yeah, I appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Dr. Magrath, for coming on the 4 Eyes podcast. We really appreciate you taking the time to reach out and connect with us and to teach us more about it. And then we'll connect with you again in 2 more years when things change. You become a billionaire with all your technology out.
Hey, I appreciate this, what you guys are doing. It's a great podcast, and thank you for doing it for our field. It's awesome.
Thank you.
So,
Thanks everyone for listening to 4 Eyes, the podcast series brought to you by Young OD Connect. Be sure to subscribe and follow us on Instagram or YouTube at 4 Eyes Optom for more content. And we'll see you guys next time. Bye.